Welcome to Angel to Exit presentation of the pitch. This is a pitch is about getting investors reasons to dig further into your company. And this presentation is for the startup who wants to learn how to pitch. I want to point out that we have several other documents and videos and related things on how to pitch and how to be effective at pitching. So you should take everything I say here with a grain of salt. I have pitched a variety of things at a variety of times, but different people pitch in different ways and different audiences listen in different ways. So the windup. The purpose of the pitch is to generate follow-on discussions with investors. You're not going to close a sale in the pitch. This is not like pitching to buyers or customers or clients. It's completely different. You're forming a relationship with somebody who's going to give you money and be a part of your business from now until exit, or maybe for a very long time at least. So as a result, it's a different kind of a sales pitch. It's not really a sales pitch, it's a partnership pitch, looking for an alliance. And it's all about qualifying. And it's an interesting kind of qualifying because the investor is self-qualifying. They're qualifying themselves as interested, and you're trying to qualify them as worthy of partnering with, somebody who you would want to get money from and work with over time with their investment. And of course, they're trying to qualify you. You want to make sure they're accredited, interested, and want to know more, and that you're an investment that they want to seriously consider. One of the big problems is if you entice all sorts of people to be interested who aren't at the end of the day going to invest, you're wasting your time and theirs. And wasting their time isn't good for enticing other investors later, but wasting your time makes it harder for you to pick out the winners. In advance, you're going to want to prepare several things. The pitch deck, of course, and the related material, including possibly samples. I'm not a big fan of samples at presentations. You don't have much time. They tend to distract people. But if you have a product that's amenable to it, or something else you can sample that's amenable to it, it's usually not harmful. You also have to have your presenter or presenters. One is usually better, but if you need more than one, I guess you do. That'd be well practiced and ready to go. So if you're going to present, you don't want to come in unprepared or ill-prepared or not having really thought through it. A lot of times people come in imagining I know everything about my business so I can pitch to the angel investor. And it's really a different sort of thing. Of course, you always want to bring your follow-up information, for example, business cards or tear sheets or anything else you need to collect information on them, provide them with information on you, help facilitate their investment and their decision to invest, and their rapid decision if they're not interested to not be interested. Who should show up? You'd like almost exclusively accredited investors. An accredited investor in the United States is somebody that has $200,000 a year of income and has for the last 2 years, or $300,000 for a couple, or has $1 million in assets in addition to their primary residence. You'd like to have accredited investors with a history of funding companies, and even better, companies like yours. So if you're a startup in the shoe sales business, you'd like investors that are, historically have invested in the shoe business and know something about it, or that know something about sales, or at least they're in some related industry, so it's not strange to them. You'd also like to get people who are able to invest in the short term. There are lots of investors that invest once or twice a year. It's not unusual for angel investors. In fact, the average angel investor, for example, in Keiretsu Forum, only invests $35,000 a year in startups. So each individual investor, the likelihood of them investing in you is relatively low. To give you a sense of this, a Keiretsu Forum investor will see 50 to 100 companies in a year and invest in one. So the odds are not great that they'll invest in you. So what you want to do is make sure you present to enough of them and that they're able to invest so that you're not wasting your time on people who are not likely candidates. What should you look like? Well, you should look like them. You should do your intelligence in advance, or ask them, what's the proper attire? How do I show up? What does it look like? If you can, go to somebody else's presentation on another day so you can see what it looks like and be prepared for it. You'd like to dress like they dress, behave like they behave, understand your audience. At the same time, you are you. Investors are not always people that are good at running startups. So So you shouldn't bend over backwards, but you should seek investors that have similar interests and alignments, because they're more likely to understand what you're saying, and you're better able to communicate effectively with them. Excuse me. There are different presentations and different perspectives on how to pitch. For example, the David Rose 13 is 13 slides. Your company logo and opening, the problem and unmet need, the team market opportunity, the product or service, the go-to-market, strategic relationship and customers, company, you see it. One slide each, boom, 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 boom. And you can look it up on the internet and you'll see just what those slides should look like. There's an alternative perspective called the perfect pitch. The perfect pitch, it gets down to not just what you should tell them about, but how much time you should spend on each. So if your total time, 25% should be on the idea, 5% the money I need, and so forth. And 50% on how you mitigate risk, which is the team, the market, go-to-market strategy, intellectual property, and then of course you set up for questions and answers. And they tell you, and you should build your script, practice it, and improve it. Get better and better at this over time. This is not something that's off the cuff if it's done properly. I also have my sort of key questions that if you don't answer my questions, then there's no chance I'll be interested. You know, first one is name and a quick summary of the company or the investment. I need to know what you're talking about right away. And there's a rule of thumb, a lot of people say this, if in the first 15 to 30 seconds they don't understand what it is, there's no chance. So you got to be able to explain what you're doing quickly and effectively in regular words without using terminology or abbreviations, right? Who sells what to whom and how? How is it fulfilled? Very brief, cost of goods sales, gross and net on revenue. What's the money as a function of time sequence? What's the path that you're going to take to turn my investment into a lot of money I'm going to get later? And then what's the deal? If you don't answer these questions for somebody like me, it's just not going to happen. We just don't know enough to even start to think about it. And remember, the investors have a lot of options. So this is when you're present, you show up for the pitch. Normally there's a meet and greet of some sort. It's before the pitch. And what you want to do is say hello and be polite and friendly and meet as many angels as you can, be as pleasant as you can, and use your 5 to 10 word quick speech that tells them what the heck you do so they understand you. And answer their questions briefly. Don't spend a lot of time with each investor, or you won't get time to even say hello to the other ones. It's great if you have somebody with you can hand it off to and then walk on to the next person and say hello, but you don't want an impolite exit from a conversation. Remember, it might be only 2 investors out of 100 that are going to invest. So if you meet one that seems interested and knowledgeable, maybe it's worth the time. This is a critical thing for any sales process. And I got this from a sales presentation course that was an awfully good one by somebody who used to be a con man, but he was very good at it, and now he's turned good, or so the world says. And the basics are, you should be sharp as a tack, full of energy, and an expert in your field. And what this is about is trust and honesty here, right? So, you know, being alert and alive and understanding what they're saying, listening carefully, being quick of mind, being full of energy, you know, alert, awake, ready to deal with the world. Happy-go-lucky is fine, not too happy to you're making too many jokes or anything like that, but engaging, and an expert in your field. You really should know what you're talking about. If you don't know these things, there's nothing you can prepare for in your script that's going to save you when they ask a question. And it shows, okay? If you know what you're talking about, it shows, and if you don't, that shows too. Your appearance, presentation, your demeanor, the way you act, how you appear, everything about you should say, this is a great jockey. And by the way, a lot of investors make their initial decision or certainly would say no based on the jockey. That is the person who's going to run this company. You know, if you're good at what you do and experienced in a similar business with successful previous exits, you speak well, you act well, you know how to interact, you know how to answer questions and deal with people, that's a big advantage in being successful. And they'll see that and they'll want to invest in that. There are also time limits. You know, a presentation like this, 10 minutes presentation, 10 minutes Q&A, sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 2 minutes. You need to hit your timing as you practice, and you'll get the hook. You know, I mean, at the end of your time frame, they will find a way to stop you. And if you try to ramble on, they'll take it out of something else, or take it out of hide, or resent you, or what have you. But at the same time, just because you're moving along quickly, you got to be careful. You don't get flustered. You got to be professional. Don't be nervous, and just move along from thing to thing systematically, knowing what you're talking about with a presentation that's well thought out and you've practiced. And finally, you get to Q&A. That's the last part of your presentation. However that question and answer period works, you need to learn how to answer what they ask. In sales, very often somebody asks a question and it's about them not being comfortable. And your answer sometimes is not to the question they asked, but to something else unrelated. And you got to be careful not to do that, especially with sophisticated investors. If I ask you, why this number seems off to me, you best have an answer. And if you go diffuse that, go into something else or dissemble, I'm just going to say, okay, there's a red flag. I'm not interested. You got to answer with it. You also have to answer quickly, precisely, and to the point. Remember, you only have so many minutes for Q&A. If you're wasting their time, wasting your time by going through a long discussion, it really doesn't help you bring it forward. That means they'll get 2 questions instead of 5. And some of the people who are interested won't get to ask their question, and maybe that answer would have said, yeah, I think I want to do that. So, this is not the Congress where you're trying to slow the process down. This is really, it's answer on demand. Stand and deliver is what this is about. Here are some things I consider to be must-haves. If your pitch does not have these things in it, you're in trouble. You need to somehow tell what the need is and its magnitude and how you're going to fulfill it. And the first 30 seconds, this is usually the first thing you talk about, is critical. They need to get it right away. So, an example, angel to exit, we help startups succeed. We provide services to help the 96% of startups who never get in front of angels to restructure their approach and build a successful angel fundable startup. And just to get a sense of the numbers here, there are hundreds of thousands of startups per year in the United States, and of those, only a few thousand get funded. So there I've given you the magnitude of a problem. I've said 96% are failing, and there's a 96% as my customer base. The delivery should be simple enough. Okay, I don't know how you're going to help startups succeed, but I get the idea. I know what you're talking about. At that point, if they're interested in achieving that objective, in fixing that problem, then they'll listen. And if they're not, then they won't. And by the way, if they're not interested, trying to get them interested later is probably not the best idea. It's, you're just wasting time and effort on somebody that's not interested. You got to tell about your team and why they are winners. There's very little time per team member. If you have 5 or 6 or 8 or 50 team members, you don't want to sit there and look at 50 team members. You want a couple of pictures of the key players with 10-word bios. If you have 40 people on your development team, you want to say we have 40 development team members who, were developers on products for some of the largest companies in the world, or something to that effect. And if they want to drill down, they can find out about it, but they need to understand the nature and seriousness of who your team is. An example, Angel to Exit, we're created and operated by leading angels affiliated with top angel investment groups. And if I had the pictures of some of those angels and their affiliations on the slide while I said that, that'd be enough said. You'd look, if you recognized or was aware of one of them as really a well-known or a good one, or somebody you knew, that'd be somebody that's a reference. If I'm in the knee surgery business, you want the head of knee surgery from a fabulous knee surgery group that's world-renowned or something like that. If you have a CFO, it's best that the CFO have relevant startup experience and other experience, particularly in the vertical of interest and so forth. So these are all things that help. So you just got to let them know that the team, and by the way, that's the jockey, right? So the next thing is the competition and why you're going to beat it. If you claim there is no competition, you can forget it. Nobody believes that there's anything worthwhile where there's no competition. But more importantly, suppose they believe that, boy, that's a fabulous, completely new idea in a completely new field. Or my God, you're the inventor of the new, Zibbelizob, which is going to restructure all buildings to be half the price and twice as long in their lifetimes. You can say that, and the problem is you may not be able to sell it, because now you have to educate the market, including all the people that build those houses, all the people that inspect those homes and everything about them. And so you've now created a situation where, because there's no competition and you're so far out ahead, you need to educate everybody. By the time you have them educated, you'll have competitors. So really, you want to talk about the competition. It's best to have a set of their logos, maybe in a comparison chart. The goal is to show why you can win and how you can win, and that you can win. Right? I mean, if you're the 18th company in the antivirus space scanning for known computer viruses, you're not likely to win, and I'm not likely to invest in you. But if you have something new, that's a little bit different from everybody else, that gives you an advantage, and you can show that to me, now I might be interested. You need to have the finances, right? If you don't give anything about the finances, the hockey stick, that's how the time is going to turn my money into more money. And the exits, how you're going to sell this thing at the end, then it's a wasted, presentation. You need to tell me, how I'm going to get my money out and why the business is going to succeed, or I'm not going to be interested. It has to make sense and be within the realm of reasonable expectations. If you say you're going to get a 500x exit in 6 weeks, if I just give you $2,000, you're going to give me 500 times $2,000 or $1 million in 3 or 4 weeks. Boy, it sounds great, but I'm not going to believe it. It'd take a lot to convince me of that. Probably take about 6 weeks, and if you were right, you'd be rich and I'd be poor, but I don't think so. So the question that you obviously would ask is, what's reasonable? And the answer is, you really should work with an angel or 3 to gain clarity around what's reasonable to them. If your real plan, of course, doesn't meet those expectations of what's reasonable for those investors, you need to rethink your plan, okay? And the reason is that not every business is suitable to investment. And if you have a business that doesn't have a good enough plan or a good enough market or a good enough situation to bring that level of success, angel investment is not a good idea. But the one thing you want to make absolutely positively certain to do is not make up numbers or claims, because what's going to happen is, almost for sure, you're going to put up a set of numbers on the screen, and I'm going to ask one of my stupid questions, or somebody's just going to ask, gee, excuse me, how come this multiplies by 2 and that multiplies by 8 in the same time frame? And I didn't see anything in your plan that says what resources you're going to use to get a multiple of 4 of the effect over the cost. And all of a sudden you're stuck. I mean, unless there's an honest to God, really good explanation behind it, you really know what you're talking about. For the most part, people that make up numbers, it's impossible to make them up so that they match, even with the light review. And believe me, an investor who's a serious investor is going to do an in-depth due diligence. And they're going to find this stuff. And if you've lied to them, or if you're making stuff up, you're going to lose a lot of credibility. And that, that trust, if that goes away, that's the reason they're investing in you, because they trust that you're going to do what you say with their money, and they believe you, and they think it's a good idea, even though it might fail. Another thing you have to tell us about is, barriers to entry and your competitive edge. For example, if it's a race, you need fast horses. So there's a lot of businesses where once you start this, you're going to be in a race with 5 other companies, you get to market, to get enough share of market and so forth. Well, the best way to win a race is with fast horses, somebody who's grown a business very quickly and of a similar sort in recent times, and the right sales and marketing person who knows how to market into that venue, and and so forth. So if it's a race, you need the fast horses. Otherwise, you need to keep the competition from entering the field. So you need some barriers that make it truly difficult for the competition, either trade secrets or intellectual property, or maybe contacts. You're well connected in an industry it's very hard to get to know. I mean, there's all sorts of potential, but you need to have some edge that's going to cause you to win. Maybe it takes 3 years to redevelop what you already have. I don't know. The sales and marketing approach you're also going to need. And this is what's called the go-to-market strategy. It should include the sales sieve, and you should see the video on Angel to Exit on that in a very simple form, with the plan that does the best with investor resources as the basis for that sieve, the same thing that you're going to generate those financials in that hockey stick with. And if you haven't figured this out, you want to make sure you have it figured out before you present. Don't go in there imagining that you're going to come up with that new sales approach in real time. I mean, a lot of these things, you'll try them and they'll fail. And it might take 50 or 60 or 5 or 6, depending on what your understanding is and how quickly you get to it, different tries of how to get this thing to work in the market before you find one that really is going to function. So after the pitch, it's either a strikeout or a home run, sort of. A home run gets you to due diligence, okay? Remember, the goal of the pitch is not to close the sale with the investor. The goal of the pitch is to get names and contact details and ultimately set up meetings and get investments from those angels. Most legitimate angels will not fund a company, at least not at any significant level, without some amount of due diligence, maybe a few $1,000s, but that's not enough to get you very far. You need due diligence. They need to look through and understand just what you're doing and why it'll work. You know, and that diligence has to come out well. That is, when they look at you, they need to say they really knew what they were talking about. That's your best shot. And that's the home run for a pitch, okay? A home run is not, oh, I got, you know, $1 million of funding in 2 days. You know, that's almost never going to happen. And if it does, you're way luckier than me or anybody I know, because I certainly wouldn't make the decision to give you money that quickly. A strikeout, that's a case where, you know, nobody is in the follow-up. If nobody expresses any interest, you're in trouble. And one of the things I talked about above was not right. Just, you know, didn't go well, or, you know, you didn't know what you were talking about, or you didn't have a viable business. But some caveats, okay? Out of 100 investors, 100, you know, accredited investors, you should expect to get perhaps 4 to 6 follow-ons and maybe 1 to 2 real investors. That's per 100 angels you present to. And it's a long road to investment. They don't come right away. They'll come over a period of days, weeks, months, well, usually not less than weeks. I rarely see less than a few weeks, more often it's months. And you should see the angel to exit presentation on how to close investors by Bill Saris. It's really a very useful process for understanding what happens afterwards, what the magnitude looks like, what the effort is, and so forth. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. And of course, anxious to have you see the other videos at Angel to Exit, and enjoy the rest of our site.